participants to the fourth day of the 4-day refresher course on GST. This is being organized by the GST and Indirect Taxes Committee, ICAI, New Delhi, and being hosted by Ernakulam branch of SIRC of ICAI. May I request our Chairman, C.A. Ranjit Warrior, to kindly welcome the speaker and the guests for the day. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you. A very, very good afternoon to all of you all, and welcoming you once again to this last and final day of our 4-day GST refresher course. And today's topic, as how Deepa rightly mentioned, is going to be assessments on GST. Rajesh sir, though we had announced yesterday that Sai Prasad sir was supposed to be the official speaker as approved by the CP Directorate, due to his emergency in a family situation, that Rajesh sir was rightly there to support us for this topic today. And like how we were initially discussing, that in spite of this very short notice and in spite of the vast topic that he is probably going to cover, we might probably, Rajesh sir might have some repetitions that he'll be skipping through because of the overlapping sections that could arise on account of the day one topic that we had. So per se, I'm sure that he is aptly the right person to take on this topic, and his profile itself speaks and says the kind of experience and exposure that he has with regard to GST. So I should be deeply thankful and to Rajesh sir for the last minute accepting our invitation, and a wholehearted welcome to you, Rajesh sir, for the day today. I should be really thankful to the participants. Probably it is the importance of this refresher course at this point of time, and also for the importance that, or I wouldn't say importance, but for the given situation that many of us are probably in lockdown situation or in states where there is no regular business that is permitted for the moment. And probably is the reason where we see a lot of registrations for all the ICAI programs per se. And we also have 350 registrations for the refresher course altogether. So I should be deeply thankful to each one of the the respected participants from across the country. I've been on the initial days where there was some glitch with the registration. I've been receiving calls from Guwahati, Kolkata, Mumbai, Delhi, Mysore, everywhere. I mean, it was so overwhelming to see the kind of response. Of course, the mass mail that went from the HO itself is a reason for the publicity, no doubt about it. But nonetheless, the attraction that people showed towards joining this refresher course, I'm deeply thankful to you on behalf of the entire managing committee of Ernakulam branch. Let me also take this good opportunity to welcome each one of you to this last and final day of this refresher course. I'm also joined here with my eminent managing committee colleagues, secretary of the branch, Deepa Varghese, immediate past chairman of the branch, C.A. Roy Varghese, past chairman of the branch, P.R. Srinivasan ji, Salim A. Sikasa chairman. I also wholeheartedly welcome you all to this program today. And without much ado, I think we'll straight away go into the topic, like how sir said, there's a lot of, probably he'll also chip in with a lot of case laws as well, or on the practical aspects and certain tips in which how the notices and assessments can be handled in a very effective and in a fashioned manner. So with these very few little words, once again, wholeheartedly welcoming you all, and thanks again for the great response. Thank you so much. Back to you, Deepa.
Thank you, Chairman. C.A. Rajesh Kumar TR is a graduate in commerce, an advocate, FCA and DSA. He is a practicing chartered accountant and has been in practice of indirect taxes from 2002. After completing his schooling and graduation and articleship at Tumkur, he moved on to Bangalore and is presently practicing in the area of indirect taxes in Bangalore. Earlier, he was one of the senior partners at Hirgange and Associates, a chartered accountancy firm famous for indirect taxation for more than 17 years. C.A. Rajesh has written many articles on central excise, service tax, VAT, and GST for various professional journals and has presented a number of papers in various seminars and workshops. He has authored a number of books on goods and service tax, central excise, service tax, KVAT, as author, joint author, as well as assisting author. In some of the books, it is a handbook on annual returns and GST audit, GST ready reckoner, GST tariff, practical guide to service tax, central excise, etc. Has contributed substantially for compilation and revision of study material on indirect taxes published by ICAI for CA final students. He has also contributed for background material on GST and UAE VAT published by ICAI. Sir has been a faculty for different programs conducted by ICAI addressing members. He is also a guest faculty at colleges and to address students. Sir, with these words, may I request you to kindly take us through assessment on GST. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank Ernakulam branch of the ICAI as well as the IDTC committee for giving me this wonderful opportunity for being with all the participants through this virtual meeting on the topic, which is assessments under the GST law. In fact, yesterday when I got a call from Sai Prasad asking me, can I take this? I said, surely I will take it. But I thought it is assessment. Generally, when we understand, we also go with the presumption that it also covers the demand related aspects to be covered. But when I saw the brochure later in the day, I found that already in detail, the aspects of the notice, there's a determination under section 73, 74, read with 75, and also 76 has already been dealt with. So then I thought that, okay, I have to give this session in much more detailed manner because I need to cover only the assessment related provision and have supplemented some of the points which I thought I will cover, and I am planning to cover the topic much more technical and much more detailed, not merely a peripheral. So I hope that that should be fine with the chairman. Now coming back to the coverage, as I said, I am going to give an introduction about what I am going to cover with specific pointers to that, or rather I would say a foundation to the discussion which I am supposed to be making today. Then I am going to discuss about different types of assessment under the GST law. Then I go deeper into each of the statutory provision and analyzing it. And I have covered also section 65 because assessment without audit, I felt maybe, be little of a vacuum. So I thought I will cover that topic and some practical tips as to if I get a communication, departmental communication or department, inquiries, etc., how to handle or what should be the approach. I thought I will cover some of those aspects. Firstly, before I go into any of the topics in my session, generally I want to give the fundamental as to the taxation. That is like all other taxes under the GST law also, there are three different elements, that is levy, assessment and collection. The levy is going to define the charge, or it is going to give up authority for the government to collect taxes. So you are attracted with the tax liability once you are falling within the ambit of the charging section or the levy section or the levy provision, whatever it can be said. Once we are said to be liable for whatever the activity which is set out in the statute, that I am liable to pay tax. The next question which comes in is, okay, I'm ready to pay or I'm liable to pay. What is the quantum of tax which I need to pay will be the question, which is where the assessment comes. Assessment is nothing but a quantification process. While quantifying the tax, we may have to consider multiple aspects like the rate of tax. For identifying the rate of tax, we may need a classification in support of it, because Why do we need classification? If we go only with the description, if somebody gives a wrong description, the rate may change. So in order to have a uniformity in the applying the rate of tax, they have to have a certain system of coding or a classification. As I mean, in that direction, there will be a defined set. As far as the goods are concerned, we have adopted the first schedule of the Customs Tariff Act, read with the rules of interpretation appended to it. When it comes to services, we have got a scheme of classification of services appended to notification number 11 of 2017 Central Tax. And that has been explained through a sort of a guidance note, which is published by CBIC. It is merely for reference, but it may not have a direct statutory impact on that. Now, with identifying a rate, the next comes the value. For value, we need to go to valuation provision, connected rules, various other aspects, various provisions contained therein. So we need to understand the entire valuation mechanism, how it works, exceptions to certain things, related party transaction with the distinct persons. All these aspects we need to keep in mind and try to identify the value of any supplies. The exemption, always I get the questions when I talk about the assessment vis-a-vis levy. Some people say, sir, exemption is not a part of the levy itself. No, levy exemption comes only when the levy is attracted. So you cannot interpret a levy by referring to an exemption notification. In fact, under the service tax law, if I have to just give an example, there was a debate which was going on whether free supply or for the purpose of levy of service tax, the worst contract vis-a-vis construction services. When the statute was being interpreted, it was said that until unless the new category of services, there's a works contract was introduced, the services were of a construction along with the goods as a composite was not at all liable for tax. So then the question came in, if that was the case, what was a reason or why there should have been an exemption giving a part of the abatement if the value of material is included. So the Supreme Court in case of Larsen and Toubro clearly gave in the last paragraph saying that the levy itself is not attracted, then we need not look into the exemption notification. So the exemption notification will not determine the tax, but whereas the levy is going to determine the exemption. So the preference is always the levy provisions. So in that context, while there's a levy to liable to pay tax, the exemptions will come and relax. Levy is a parliamentary activity, whereas Parliament's mandate, whereas the exemption is a execute, that is a government mandate in a public interest which they come out and give an exemption. So I think this assessment is something which is, by looking into all these aspects, we need to quantify the tax payable by the person who is liable to pay tax to the government. So the process of this quantification is called assessment. Once the tax is collected, quantified, the next question comes in is collection of the taxes. That means how somebody collection, when I said collection from the government side, payment from the person liable to pay tax. So he is supposed to, the methodology of the payment, if it doesn't pay, what is the other methodology which is given to the government to collect it in the form of a recovery, and in the process the methodology of a determination of that particular tax short paid, not paid, ITC wrongly availed or wrongly utilized, or refunds erroneously given to the SSC. So all these are part of the collection process. Now today's discussion, we are concerned about the second aspect, that is assessment. I wanted to discuss assessment, adjudication. Is there a difference between assessment and adjudication? Why this is important is because most of our professional friends would have been handling the income tax matters, and many would have now shifted towards the indirect taxation, or at least forced to practice the indirect taxes in the form of GST. When they have been practicing income tax, the process which they would have been undergone would be the process of assessment, because the provisions under the income tax deals with assessment and reassessment. To my limited knowledge of income tax, I do not see there is an adjudication proceedings under the income tax law, as against which under the service tax law, or for that matter central excise law, it was a process of adjudication which was essentially prevailing, not that of an assessment. What is the difference? Assessment, as I said, is a very wide term of process of quantifying the amount of tax, whereas adjudication is a process which is generally carried out by a court or authority when there is some dispute, examining the evidences and passes an order or judgment. Now, under the GST law also, assessment procedures and aspect is different. Adjudication process and procedure is different. Whereas Chapter 12 deals with assessment procedures, whereas Chapter 15 deals with the adjudication related procedure. So I think what essentially makes a difference is, in an assessment proceedings, the burden of proof, or for that matter, whatever the information asked or the details asked, you are supposed to give, because there is nothing like a frozen specifications in an assessment or reassessment proceedings. Whereas in adjudication proceedings, it's a quasi-judicial process where there will be notice specifying certain allegations, which is what would be the matter of dispute, supported by evidences laid by the person issuing a notice, where the obligation upon the person issuing a notice is to prove his case and give an opportunity for the noticee to explain his case against the allegation. There's nothing which new will come in order. He's only supposed to address what has been put across in the notice based on the replay document evidences placed by the noticee. Orders would be passed, which is supposed to be a speaking order. So this is how the adjudication proceedings happens. As I mentioned, under the GST law, there's a separate set of provision which deals with assessment and reassessment, whereas adjudication also, essentially section 73, 74, read with 75, and in certain cases of 76 also are a part of adjudication proceedings. When we talk about the provisions which deals with assessment, Chapter 12, as I mentioned, it covers 6 sections, starting from section 59 up to section 64. We'll discuss each of these sections, what it covers, what it deals with, what is a burden or the responsibility or the rights of the departmental officers. At the same time, what is the obligation on the registered person or a non-registered person? We'll go on in detail with each of these sections. When we compare that with the demand and recovery provisions, chapter 15 deals with it, with 12, where 73 to 75 is for determination of a tax short paid, not paid, erroneously refunded, or ITC wrongly availed, or ITC wrongly utilized. 76 is where any tax or amount collected as tax but not paid to government. 77 is tax paid with a mistaken nature of supply. 78, 79 is recovery. 80 is payment of tax on installment. 81 to 84 are other provisions relating to the recovery. That's 78, 79. Now, if I have to look at the definition of assessment given in section 2, subsection 11 or clause 11, assessment means determination of tax liability under this act and includes self-assessment, reassessment, provisional assessment, summary assessment, and best judgment assessment. So, as it is talking about self-assessment, reassessment, provisional assessment, summary assessment, and best judgment assessment. In fact, after I cover some of these assessment related provision, and towards the end when I'm going to discuss about on referring to section 73 and 75, I'm just going to make little important points distinguishing which of these should be invoked or which can be invoked. If something is inversely invoked, then what should be our approach? We'll discuss about that later. Now, when it comes to adjudication, the adjudicating authority, they say adjudicating authority is defined to mean any authority appointed or authorized to pass an order or decision under this act, but does not include CBIC, Revisional Authority, Authority for Advanced Ruling, Appellate Authority for Advanced Ruling, National Appellate Authority for Advanced Ruling, Appellate Authority, Appellate Tribunal, Anti-Profiteering Authority. I think I'm not going to why they are saying is these are all, when we talk about adjudicating authority, it is the original authority. It's also called as original authority, or the authority who examines the documentation and passes a order on any given issue under this act. Now, before going into further discussion, we need to understand the hierarchy of the department officers, both from the central taxes perspective and state taxes perspective. From the central taxes perspective, the hierarchy of the officers would be like this: Principal, Chief Commissioner of Central Taxes, Chief Commissioner of Central Taxes, Principal Commissioner of Central Taxes, Commissioner of Central Taxes, Additional Commissioner of Central Taxes, Joint Commissioner of Central Taxes, Deputy Commissioner of Central Taxes, Assistant Commissioner of Central Taxes. Any other class has been notified. At the end, it is said officers of the central excise are deemed to be appointed under the GST. So if they are already an officer appointed under central excise, they are deemed to be officers appointed under GST. Now there is many of professional friends may be getting show cause notices under the restful service tax law, based on the comparison of the data from income tax supplied to the GST department. Now there I have little of a issue or a complaint to make. Here there's a definition that the officers of central excise are deemed to be appointed GST, but if any new officer who has been appointed in the GST law, I mean, as a GST officers, and acting under the designation of a GST officer, how can they issue a notices under the restwhile laws without specifying what is a notification under which they are acting so? How is that they have got a jurisdiction to issue notice to a particular SSC for located a particular area? And as to the financial purpose, it was defined the restwhile law, how they are fitting into all these questions may arise. So be conscious of looking at it and questioning those type of notices, in addition to so many other questions or other objections you may take. When it comes to, okay, one more thing, if you see, there is a, on the continuation of that, there is a Director General. There is a Principal Director General, Director General, then Principal Additional Director General, Additional Director General. I think AD, one more thing is a, they call something, then Joint Director, then Deputy Director, so Assistant Director. So these are the hierarchies which are there as far as the investigate. I think I would like to mention here, presently or recently there was a decision of Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Canon India, wherein under the customs law, when the custom law use the word who can issue notice and adjudicate, the statute used the word the proper officer. When they use the word the proper officer, though government came out and issued a notification defining the jurisdiction of investigating officers across the country, it was challenged, stating that when the statute using the word the is more specific, so there can be only one officer, there cannot be two, I mean, some other officer who is generally be given a jurisdiction. So therefore, that notice issued by the DRI would not be a valid show cause notice. Taking clue from that, already in Karnataka High Court, one of the proceedings is stayed where the show cause notice was issued by DG GST under the service tax law, where it was made addressable to DG GST, Principal DG GST at Mumbai. So again, why I am highlighting this fact, the same aspect we may have to look at it from the GST law, because even with the GST law, the term uses the proper officer. So who is the proper officer? We'll go and look at the definition later, but I'm just highlighting that when we are talking about it, in fact, Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Syed Ali, there's one paragraph which is mentioned over there, where it says, okay, you define jurisdiction for a particular SSC, but if you're giving the authority for two officer for the same SSC, then it's going to create a chaotic position. So taking a clue from there, here also, if a DGGST is operating as an investigation agency, they can probably investigate, but the corresponding information to be given to the jurisdictional officer to issue a notice would be an ideal proposition. They themselves coming out and issuing a notice or adjudicating a matter may be much beyond the scope of the statutory provision, is what my opinion on that. When it comes to state GST, most of the states has a similar thing. Commissioner of state taxes, additional commissioner of state taxes, joint commissioner, deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner, and other things. So I think why I said that is because you need to refer to the circular where it was issued as to defining who will be the proper officer. In fact, initially it was issued by the board. There was an objection taken by some of them in the court, Then they issued a corrigendum to say it is not issued by board, it is issued by the government, because the power to notify is with the government, not with the board. So I think next is we as a professional chartered accountants, many of the times we will represent our cases before the authorities in any assessment proceedings. So I thought it appropriate that I need to discuss this provision, that is section 116, where it says any person who is entitled or required to appear before any officer of under GST or appellate authority or appellate tribunal. So in connection with any proceedings in the GST, any proceedings in the GST, he may appear by an authorized representative. So they say when statute requires to appear any assessee, any person to appear before the GST officer or appellate authority or appellate tribunal, that person can appear through his authorized representative. However, there's an exception where statute requires that that person should only go and give his examination on oath or affirmation. Then I think the same person should go. In fact, on this point, I would like to emphasize here, as a chartered accountants, unless we are well versed with the day-to-day transaction and the facts of the case, we should not go and take an authority and go and give any sworn statement or deposition, because we are actually are not their sort of people who are knowing everything. So it is a fact-based deposition, always a fact-based. It is suggested because once you give a statement, then you can be always examined, cross-examined, called for a re-evidence, all those things. So I think so we need to be very careful on that aspect of it, because if there's any misstatement over there, then chartered accountants and also professional conduct, all those things will come into picture. When it comes to the definition of authorized representative, they say as referred to in section 116, and when it comes to 116, overall can be authorized representative. It says a relative, that is any person that applies to an individual, his relative or regular employee and practicing chartered accountant, any practicing chartered accountant, a practicing cost accountant, a company secretary, a retired officer of the tax department of state government or unitary or of the board, worked at least 2 years in a post not with rank than that of Group B guest officer after 1 year from the retirement or resignation, then authorized GST practitioners. So these are the people who can appear. In this thing, I've seen in a couple of cases, there will be one person who will be acting as a group CFO, group CEO, or a group financial advisor, or a group consultant, who might not be falling into any of these categories, because he may be a chartered accountant by qualification, but he may not have a certificate of practice to be called as a practicing chartered accountant. So in such a case, he may not be falling into any of these things. Technically speaking, he will not be entitled to appear that particular case, because he might not be a regular employee of that particular person. So I think we need to be aware. Generally, it goes off. Nobody will question that so seriously and so deeply, but if somebody asks that, we need to be aware of it. One more point I want to highlight for our CA friends is that if you carefully read it here, it is not talking about a practicing chartered accountant or firm of chartered accountants. So when an authorization is given, it is given in the name of a chartered accountant, not in the name of the firm. Even the firm may be mentioned, but it is given in the name of a particular chartered accountant. So, which we need to be clear when we are putting it. It cannot be said that we authorize ABC, LLP or ABC and Co. And there, the name whose name has not been mentioned over there in the authorization can go and appear technically. Okay, so I think we need to be aware when we are getting the authorization letter drafted, how it should be, etc. We need to be aware of it. When it comes to cross power, section 6 is what we need to refer under the CGST Act. Before I explain this, we need to fundamentally understand the fact that we are not dealing with one statute. We are dealing with 3 or 4 statutes, as the case may be, including cess, depending upon the transaction what we are doing. Though it appears that it is one as to the compliance and procedures, technically speaking, the statutory provisions are operating separately and independently on a particular transaction together. For example, when we are doing an intrastate supply, there's a local supply. Both the provisions of state GST as well as central GST acts are equally and simultaneously and parallelly operating, and we are also complying both the provisions simultaneously and parallelly when we are complying with it. Though that has been made by mechanism of adoption from one thing. Similarly, when we are doing an interstate supply, IGST Act is only operating, borrowing some provision from the CGST Act for making it operational, but the act which is being made applicable is IGST Act. So this is how we need to keep in mind why I am stressing upon this, especially when you are getting into the aspect of the litigation, or for that matter, defense, or something has happened, you want to save yourself, all those things. You need to know all these technicalities very well. Now, with this thing, I will go with each of the point. Then you'll understand why this section is so drafted. Officers of the state are constituted as a proper officer as per the notification issued by the central government, and vice versa. Officers of the state, center is also treated as the officer of the state as per the notification issued by the state government. So this is how they work. They step into the shoes of the others' role as and when required. In order to avoid multiplicity of jurisdiction coming in, is where there was a common notification which was issued, wherein they said you will be assigned either to state or center, as the case may be. If you are assigned to state, the state officer will also behave like a central officer, or if you have been assigned to state, the state officer will also behave like a central officer. So, and he is empowered to enforce upon the central GST Act as well as the IGST Act. So he takes that power and carry out that. Now, when a proper officer is required to issue an order, this section says he should issue an order under both Central GST Act as well as the State GST Act. So when any proceedings is passing order, he is passing orders as to both Central Act as well as a State Act. Now there's one more thing which has been there in this section, is that whoever comes first in any proceedings on any aspect, any subject matter, if the central officer initiates the proceedings, then state officer is debarred by initiating proceedings against the same matter again, and similarly vice versa. Now, this is where the problem which came up, saying once have been assigned to central authority, how can a state intelligence initiate a proceedings against me? I think presently with whatever the clarifications by the council, legality of which will be challenged before the courts. So they say it is permissible to be done like that. Next is also important, where any rectification, appeal, revision is being taken up in any proceedings, that rectification or appeal or revision should go before the same same line of authority, in the sense, if the order is passed by the central officer, the rectification should go to the central officer, appeal also should go to central officer, revision also should go to the central officer. Same way, if the order is passed by the state officer, the rectification should be made by the state officer only, the appeal also should go before the state officer, the revision also should go to the state officer. However, exception to this is only at the tribunal stage. Up to tribunal, that will be the same. But when it comes to the tribunal stage, if it's a matter involving a place of supply, then appeal against the first appellate authority's order or revision order under section 108 will go straight away to the central tribunal, national tribunal. On the other hand, if there that any one or the only matter, say if among many issues, one of the issues is a place of supply, then also the appeal will lie before the national tribunal. On the other hand, if there is no issue of a place of supply, then the appeal would lie before the state tribunal. Now, what difference does it make? Any order passed by the state tribunal, appeal against that will go to High Court, then from High Court, then to Supreme Court. Whereas in case of a national tribunal, order passed again by the national tribunal, appeal against that goes directly to Supreme Court. This is just a flow how it goes. Article 265 of the Constitution says, no tax shall be levied or collected except by authority of law. Collection of tax means procedure to be followed by the proper officer, and he should do the procedure correctly. Again, if any search or inquiry is being conducted by the proper officer, it should be done with a proper power and authorization. Many a times this search may be illegal, but once some evidence gets collected in such illegal search, they can use it against you. So we have to be very careful to question any such illegal or the without authority proceedings at the threshold itself, not allow it to. Now I move on to the core topic of assessment. If we see this chart, assessment can be by the taxpayer or by the authorities, or involvement of the authorities. The taxpayer, when he assesses his own tax, we call it as a self-assessment. In fact, under the central indirect taxes, or for that matter, any indirect taxes earlier, most of them was only assessment by authorities. However, over a period of time with liberalization, they started moving towards a self-assessment and removing the departmental assessment. Anyhow, I'm talking about this, I don't know that this point was discussed in the first day session. If we see section 73, or for that matter 74, which talks about, especially 74, tax not paid or short paid, as compared to earlier tax of central excise, which was talking about short levy or short paid. I repeat, short levy or short paid, or non-levy or not paid. What is the difference between these two? I could now in the GST law, they have consciously removed these two words, that is non-levy or a short levy. What I understand from my reading of it, since under the GST law, there is no assessment. All these other things which comes up is a summary assessments. Sorry, reassessment. The original assessment is not done by the department before permitting the transaction. Like, in customs, before clearance, they used to assess. In the central excise, before clearance of goods, they were assessing. Before the goods were leaving a manufacturer, they were assessing. Physical control or physical controlled assessments. So there, the officer used to assess the tax. So when they were assessing, and if they miss out something, that was constituted to be a not levy or a short levy by the officer. Whereas when we are doing a self-assessment, I have not paid or short paid that amount. So this is what is the thin difference over there, which I could make. Since under the GST law, we don't have that mechanism, probably they would have felt that non-levy and short levy may not be relevant. Consequently, if you see further in the same section 74, we talk about fraud, willful misstatement of facts, suppression of facts to evade tax. But whereas if we compare erstwhile indirect taxes, we were having fraud or collusion. Again, when the assessment was done by the departmental officer, there could have been a possibility of a collusion in the reduction of the taxes. That is where both levy as well as collusion is removed, and because under the GST law we don't find this aspect of department assessing the tax before the transaction being permitted. So I think that is why this differentiation. I thought it, as a academical and maybe why to know about it, I thought I'll explain that. Okay, so this is a self-assessment vis-a-vis the departmental assessment. Majority of the other things which we talk about, except in case of a best judgment of non-filers and unregistered persons, is not a reassessment, it's a first-time assessment based on best judgment, because we have not, the person who is supposed to come forward and assess his tax is not doing it. So when we're talking about assessment, when the taxpayer, he's going to do self-assess his tax, pay the taxes declared by him, assessed by him. Whereas when it comes to assessment by authorities, there will be a provisional assessment, there will be a summary assessment. When it comes to provisional assessment, briefly, in detail, we're going to discuss later. Where there is a difficulty in doing a self-assessment, they permit the assessee to do a self-assessment on a provisional basis. Later on, the authorities are going to call for the records, assess the correct tax payable, and demand for the differential, ask for the differential, collect the same with interest. On the other hand, if they already collected extra tax, they refund that back. So this is the overall scheme of provisional assessment. Summary assessment is in a special circumstances where the authorities feel that they cannot wait till the normal and regular process of assessment undergoes, by which time they may miss out the goods. Then they may, take shelter or take a support of the summary assessment. Scrutiny of returns and assessing, then best judgment assessment. So this is how the structure of assessment is designed in this provision, in this chapter rather. Section 59 talks about self-assessment. Here, this provision mandates, I repeat, mandates every registered person. Now see, a person who is not registered is outside the clutches of the, the system. Therefore, you cannot expect him to come out and self-assess. For them, there is a separate mechanism which is there, which we'll discuss that. Now, if somebody is registered, he is mandated to self-assess his tax and is asked to pay tax and furnish the details of the self-assessed tax in the returns as specified under section 39. 39 gives different types of return for different type of people. So they have to file the return. Here, self-assess the tax payable. Sometimes it may so happen that there may be error in the value declaration, but the tax is correctly assessed. The mandate in section 59 is to self-assess the tax. See, ultimately the output is tax. As I mentioned in the first slide which I explained, the value, rate of tax, classification are all merely a sort of an inputs to take an output of tax payable. So even the mandate in section 59 is to self-assess the final tax payable by considering all these other aspects of valuation, classification, rate of tax, all the exemption, etc. Now, the statute also mandates the self-assessment for each tax period. I cannot say, okay, 1 month I missed, I've assessed the tax in the next month, so therefore I am okay with it. No. Statutorily, the registered person is required to self-assess his tax liability for each tax period, which is a month, and furnish a return for the tax period specified in 30. In some of them, there is a quarterly that will become a tax period for that return. Now comes section 61. Section 61 is actually, it is not an assessment in true sense. It merely empowers the officer to scrutinize and intimate the discrepancy and ask to proceed. Now, if you see, I have just extracted the statutory provision for our understanding and also given a highlights at a later point in time as well. Here, the provision starts with the proper officer. When I'm saying proper officer, we have to, I think I missed out that particular slide defining proper officer. I think better I read it out for the better understanding. Proper officer in relation to any function to be performed under this act means the commissioner or the officer of the central taxes who is assigned that function by the commissioner in the board. So the commissioner in the board will specify who is going to do what, and that designated officer will become a proper officer. So I think this is what is relevant. There is a notice, circular issued to this effect, saying that for which all the section, who has been appointed as the proper officer. So we need to look at that and accordingly see when some office we receive a notice or a letter or a communication, we should check out which is a section under which that letter or a notice is being served. Then you go back to that circular and see who is the officer who has been called as a proper officer for that particular section and whether he only has issued a notice or a letter in accordance with that section. So that is how we need to look at it. This section talks about scrutinizing the return. When we read the rule, it says when any return furnished by registered person. So this will come into picture only when there's a return filed and is selected for scrutiny. We do not know what is a methodology and a mechanism which will be designed for selection of scrutiny. Once such methodology is designed and that return is taken up for scrutiny, then the officer is empowered to scrutinize that return. Section read with the rules. Simply an officer cannot randomly ask for the details unless the return in question is selected for scrutiny, where there should be some guidelines or the methodology suggested by board. Otherwise, we can always ask what is the basis of you selecting this return for scrutiny. Now, having selected for scrutiny, the officer is required to verify or scrutinize. What he is going to scrutinize for? The correctness of the return. He is going to scrutinize the return and the related particulars furnished. Please understand, we are talking about the returns and related particulars furnished. Now there is always a debate whether the information coming out in GSTR 2A can be a basis to take up the case for scrutiny. When GSTR 1 itself is not a return at all, it is merely a statement of outward supply. Whereas in the provision is talking about return and related particulars furnished by the registered person. So here registered person in my reading is not any registered person. It is the registered person whose records are being verified or scrutinized. Return is being scrutinized. So somebody else's data cannot be a basis for scrutinizing the returns under section 61. This is my view on this. Now, they cannot ask information to verify the returns or scrutinize the returns. First, they should scrutinize the return with the available information. Based on the scrutiny, they should mark their points, what are the discrepancy, and straight away ask for the reasons for the discrepancy, and if required, if possible, based on the discrepancy, they should be able to quantify the tax and the interest payable, if any, on that. So in other words, the discrepancy which we are talking about is the prima facie discrepancies. For example, the rate of tax adopted is 18%. When we apply that 18% onto the value, the tax is not matching. The value is declared at whatever 10 lakh, 18% of 1.8 lakh, the amount of tax mentioned is only 1.5 lakh. So there is a discrepancy. Like that, there may be other type of a discrepancy which they should be able to look out from the returns or any other particulars furnished already in any other form by that person. So cross-checking the annual return or through that also they can look at, because they have that information already with them, which has been furnished by the assessee, the registered person. So what is the purpose? Correctness of the return. And if they find that there's any discrepancy, it has to be informed to the registered person. What is the way in which it has to be intimated? They have prescribed Form ASMT 10, asking for a explanation for that discrepancy. The rule is saying the time to be given to explain the discrepancy shall not exceed 30 days. This is where I have a problem. It is not saying minimum 30 days, not exceeding 30 days. That means they may even given 7 days. If it is not so answered, the further proceedings will proceed. But anyway, for the time being, the rule is fixing this 30 days, whereas this section do not give any such time limit. So in my reading of it, it's always we can take it merely as a directory and not mandatory time limit. So we can always seek for an extension and take a time, because they also say further time which he may permit. So extension also he can give it. Okay. Once that particular explanation is sought for, and what is the responsibility of a registered person? He may say, yes, there was a mistake, so I accept the discrepancy. He may say so, or and pay. Once he accepts and pay tax and interest or any other amount, and inform the same. Inform ASMT 11. If he says no, if he feels that what the discrepancy noted by the officer, proper officer, is not correct, he can give an explanation clarifying the doubt. Now, if once you give a clarification, if the officer feels that it is okay, fine, he's satisfied with it, then he can give his acceptance, or he should give his acceptance in Form ASMT 12. But to my experience, in the past, whenever this ASMT 10 was issued, first of all, the CSV or any other professional, or for that matter assessees, did not respond in ASMT 11. We responded merely through a normal letter, and they also did not close or concluded by issuing ASMT 12. So in one of the seminars, this question was asked. So they are not issued ASMT 12. What should we do? You can just keep quiet, assuming that you can always write to them saying there is a ASMT 12 which you are not concluded. So we hope that the proceeding is closed after our explanation. You can write that letter and keep the acknowledgement. What happens if you don't respond, or you do not give a satisfactory explanation? There are two things. Though the highlighted word is one, it has got two scenarios within it. One, explanation provided within 30 days. Two, explanation not provided. Explanation provided which is not satisfactory is one scenario. Two is explanation not at all provided within 30 days. On the other hand, you have accepted the discrepancy, but you have not made a correction. So in that scenario, what is the consequences which can come up? Now, the provision says that the proper officer may initiate appropriate action. What is that appropriate action is not specifically mentioned, but however, it says including those of section 65, 66, 67, or 73 or 74. 65 is an audit, 66 departmental audit, 66 is special audit, 67 is inspection, etc. Then whereas 73, 74 is determination and section 7. So basically, what proceeds further? Section 61 is not an end in itself. Section 67 is merely a way to other ends which may lead to 73 or 74. Ultimately, 61 should lead to 73 or 74. Because even if you go to 65 or 66 or 67, that would obviously lead to either 73 or 74 or nothing. So 61 is merely the intermittent process and not the final process. To just summarize the bullet points, sorry, one more point I want to highlight, sorry. If you have highlighted fails to take a corrective measure in his return for the month in which the discrepancy is accepted. So it is talking about some turnover missed out or some wrong calculation, etc. You can give effect to in the return in which you file your ASMT 11. How to be given, what, where, which column, all those things are not coming out here. But by looking at this provision, we can have an option to make the correction when we got the intimation from the department under section 61. Please also note, if in the previous slide provision, it is section 61 itself. Rule is talking about possibly quantifying the amount of tax and interest. Here, they are not mentioning about penalty. So in my reading, once we get ASMT 10 and there's a discrepancy, and we accept the discrepancy and pay it by filing ASMT 11, there should not be any penal consequence consequent to it, because it is coming out from the return. Obviously, your 74 cannot be invoked. 73 is more or less will yield the same thing, because once it is disclosed in the return, there's no suppression of fact, or there's no fraud when you already filed in the returns. So there is no misstatement of fact possibly. So in such cases, they may try to, we may close it 73.5, even if you pay before the issue of a notice, tax plus interest, the matter get closed without any penalties. I think so. 61 is a first opportunity for any registered person to close the proceedings when it's on being pointed out. So this is, I think, is something which we need to make a noting on this. So the same thing I've just summarized. When I talked about this correctness, the question is, what type of correctness? Is it merely arithmetical accuracy, ratios, detailed assessment? Can they say, I want to scrutinize your returns, so bring all your invoices? They can only intimate the discrepancies for which you have to give an explanation. They cannot carry out an assessment through scrutiny. Please note it down. Okay. So they cannot call for a records through this. They can only say this is the value which is over here. This is the value over here. So there is something which is not correct. Unlike in service tax, for scrutiny of return, they were permitted to call for the records, which is not the case in the GST. So I think that is also we need to know. There is no power under section 61 to call for record to scrutinize the return. Okay. I explained this already. I think which is more. Which I said, what all the proceedings it can lead to. One is conducting, they can ask department, they can refer the matter to the audit wing for carrying out the audit. Then they can request for a special audit under section 66, where chartered accountant or a cost accountant initiate an inspection, search and seizure. If you ask me, under is there any provision by which they can ask for a records or a information under section 61? No, I think that should go under these sections only, 67 and other things. Issue notice on 77, which we already discussed. Now we move on to section 62 and 63. These two sections talks about best judgment assessment. What is best judgment assessment? The assessing officer is going to assess the tax based on his own reasoning, using the information available. It may not be accurate, but it should have some reasonable basis to come to that particular quantification. There should not be any bias on part of the. Let me just give a couple of points, practical points in this. Many of our friends over here are well versed in the income tax law. You know, a lot of decisions given under the income tax law have dealt thoroughly as to the scope and limitation and the mandate of best judgment assessments. Please look at those decisions, use those principles when these provisions are invoked. Why I'm saying that is, both state officers as well as central officers are not aware mostly, because under the rest-by law they would have not dealt with the best judgment assessment following all those rigors of the principles which has been given by various courts as to how to do a best judgment assessment. In fact, we are receiving number of show cause notices presently on comparison of the income tax data versus the service tax data. What is being done? They would have got information for 15-16. They will not have information for 16-17, 17-18. They say, based on the available information for 16-17, we do a best judgment assessment by adding 20% for each year for next 2 years. And since the last year is not a full year, we divide, we take average and take it to be a 3 months figure divided by 4. Adding 20% divided by 4. Unfortunately, they do not even say why they are adopting the 20%, because it is very much essential in doing a best judgment assessment what they are intending to do, why they are intending to do, and on what basis they are intending. Most of the cases, all the three may not be there, leading to a lack in the entire process of doing a best judgment assessment. So you can look at any notice which comes up for best judgment assessment, whether these aspects are there or not. Couple of points which I want to challenge it, bring out, because some of the practical issues comes up in section 62, which we'll deal with it. Under the GST, two things. One is section 62 for a registered person who is not filed returns, whereas section 63 is a person who is not registered. Now, having told this sequence, self-assessment, best judgment in case of a non-return file, non-filer, best judgment in case of a unregistered person. Then 73, 74. how we have to harmonize all the three. See, if a person has not filed a return or not all registered under the GST law, in my reading, they have to first undergo the provisions of section 63. In my view, 73 and 74, as the case may be, can be invoked in a case where there has been an assessment which has been a short assessed and paid or not paid. Though there is a mention of not paid, it can only pass through. And I mean, this argument may be little thing where they may say that no, it also covers a non-payment. Non-payment is fine, but once there is a mechanism available, shouldn't this be applied first, then go there? Alternatively, for 73, 74, going for 74, they have to have all the evidences to determine the tax, because they are alleging that there is a short payment or non-payment. So burden of proof comes on to the officer. So they have to carry out an investigation, inquiry, collect the documentation, etc. But when they do not have anything on their record and they are going on a estimate basis, then they have to first look for a best judgment assessment, carry out an assessment proceeding on the best judgment. Then if they can close that, if they are not going for best judgment, then they have to go for a with evidences. There cannot be a mix of both, because invariably we see in the present service tax notices missing out this very important aspect. There also 72 is there, 73 is there. 72 on the Service Tax Finance Act 1994 was for a best judgment assessment. 73 is for a determination, the demand and recovery. Now, they both cannot coexist in a one notice, because once you are determining tax and the best judgment, then there is no question of 73 being invoked again. Unfortunately, the department seems to have been missing this very important aspects and adopting 72 and considering that amount as not paid, without first giving an opportunity for a best judgment. They have already determined that amount to be short payment and proceeding with 73, which is not a proper methodology in the service tax law. Though I'm referring to service tax because many of the professional friends would have got such notice, we can use that. So I'm just giving how the harmonious thing go. There's a best judgment in case of a return filed under 59, scrutiny, and then leading to 73, 74 if there is a short payment, non-payment. Then for a non-filers, there is a 62, somebody who is not within the clutches, then 63. Then there is an investigation inquiry. They can invoke straight away with the evidences they may have to 73, 74. Without evidence, 63 or 62 as the case may be. Now, when I look into this section 62, the 62 subsection 1, the opening phrase is notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in section 73 or 74. That means this prevails over there. This prevails over that. Where a registered person fails to furnish the returns under section 39 or 45, even after the service of notice under section 46. That means section 46 should be first invoked. In spite of invoking section 46, still the assessee or the registered person do not come forward and file the returns, then the provisions of section 62(1) is proceeded with. Now, if you see this provision carefully, what is that the proper officer is going to do? He may proceed to assess the tax liability of the said person, that is a registered person, to the best of his judgment, taking into account all the relevant material. I repeat, all the relevant material which is available or which he has gathered. One, it should be already available, or he has collected and issue an assessment order. So he is going to assess a tax. Then the time limit for that will come to that later. Now the question, some questions comes up. He has some information. He has gathered some information. Based on that, he issues an order. Is it proper for the officer to pass any order without giving an opportunity of hearing to the affected party? As per the principles of natural justice, any person who is affected should be given an opportunity of hearing, though there is no specific mention of the same in the statutory provision. These are well set principles. So here also, though this section do not mandate passing an order without giving a hearing, can be a basis of going against that in a writ petition to the High Court to quash it out. There, this when any such order is passed, and what happens if I don't, the next exceptions which comes in, where if you file the return within 30 days, it's deemed to be withdrawn, it doesn't become the final. Now, there are many cases where these orders have been passed under section 62. People are not even aware of it. Even if they were aware, they have not appealed against it, and it would have reached the finality. Possibly, the only remedy available now would be to take a challenge against the process of passing that order. Like, what I said, point number 1, that is, no hearing was given, so it's against the principles of natural justice. 2, the notice was not at all communicated. 3, the officer who passed the order is not a proper officer. 4, the officer who has passed the order is not falling within the jurisdiction who was supposed to pass the order. One more can be, he has not followed the process set out in the rules for whatever reasons. So like you should find some deficiencies and take it to High Court and get it quashed. Otherwise, of which, if even though genuinely that order is wrong, it would become a final order. So I think the law as it stands today, that is what will be. So we need to be very, very careful on that aspect of it. Now the time limit is 5 years from the date specified in section 44, there's annual return, to which the tax not paid relates to. So whatever the tax being determined, that financial year, then from due date for filing annual return, from there 5 years up to that, there's a time limit for them to pass out. But now with the all the data being available readily in the GST and portal, they're getting information immediately. They have activated properly in the portal and some in software, so that it prompts the authority to withdraw the cases where the returns have not been filed. They are proceeding to initiate these proceedings as early as possible. When it comes to the section 46, the notice is in form GSTR 3A. The returns 39 is a regular registration, composition dealer, TDS, ISD, NRTP, monthly return, quarterly return, annual return, all of them falls in order. Annual return, final returns 44 and 45. That is what is covered in section 46. When it comes to the procedure is concerned, the order for passing the order should be issued in form SMT 30, and summary thereof shall be uploaded electronically in form GST DRC 07. There is one more question which was raised in one of the seminars. Sir, they would have passed ASMT 13, but they would have not uploaded form DRC 07. So then what happens? Once they have not uploaded that summary of that demand DRC 07, can I say that I have not been enabled to file an appeal against that electronically, or not been process not yet completed, merely ASMT 13 without uploading of DRC 07, the process is not complete. Therefore, my time limit should start from the last day of the date when they upload the DRC 07 for me to go for an appeal. Okay, so that is the one possible argument somebody can take if they have lost that time limit to save their case. Now the provision section 62 subsection 2 says, where a registered person furnishes a valid return within 30 days of the service of the assessment order. Now, when it comes to service of the assessment order, it requires us to look at section 169. Section 169 provides the methodology in which the notices, order, summon, communication shall be served, where even uploading in portal and or through email ID provided would be construed as a service of the order. So we need to be very careful as to that time limit. Though in section 169, there's a possibility of some argument to say, when we read that subsection 2, they consciously, or there's a missing of the email and portal communication in subsection 2. So can that be taken to say, though for the it is one of the valid modes of a service, for all the legal purposes, it should be served only through tendering, publishing, or making available the copy. It can be an argument which you can look at referring to section 169(2). Again, this subsection 2 talks about situation where even in case your notice is deemed to have been withdrawn because you have filed. Say, for example, the ASMT 10 got issued for 10 lakh rupees value and corresponding tax on it. It was not responded. The order is passed in ASMT 13 that, saying that the turnover is 10 lakh and the corresponding tax. Now, within 30 days, if you file a return saying that my turnover is just 3 lakh rupees, then that assessment order under ASMT 13 will be deemed to be non-existing and your return will become valid. However, if you do not do that, then what is the remedy available? You have to file an appeal against that particular order within the time limit for filing an appeal as set out in section 107. Now, there the time limit is 3 months from the date of communication. I'm repeating, communication. There's a difference between the word service here and a communication there. If for any reason you say that it is not communicated, then you have to take a time from the date of communication. From there up to 3 months to file an appeal against this order, making the required pre-deposit, whatever is that 10%. And there you have to take all the grounds as to producing all the documents, evidences, etc., as to your correct turnover and the tax payable, and get the order quashed ASMT 13. So this is what is the process. Assume that your time limit to file appeal also has gone. As I said, you need to go back and challenge the validity of the order itself, otherwise of which the liability would be fastened on the person on whom the TSMP 13 is passed. So we have to be very careful on that. Now, even if you file the return within 30 days and the assessment order gets, invalid, for the returns you file, you have to pay both interest for the delayed payment of tax and also the late fee for the delayed filing of a return as may be applicable. This is just a flow chart. This presentation will be shared to the branch, and they may circulate to the participants with whatever the email ID they would have got. I think I've already explained in a sense all this aspect. This we explained. I think further is for that. Now, when it comes to section 63, 63 is assessment of unregistered person. Again, this section also starts with notwithstanding. So that means section 70-74 is given go by. Where a taxable person, who's taxable person? Any person who is registered or liable to be registered. So here when we are talking about unregistered means obviously a person who is liable to be registered but who has not taken a registration. Or there is another situation where registration was taken, it was cancelled for any of the violations in the law under section 29, but there was a liability to pay tax. In such a scenario, he would not come up and file the returns. Though he is not filing a return, the assessment can be made by the officer going through a best judgment assessment. There, if you see, one important thing is, in both the best judgment assessment, they will assess as per the information available. They will not say, please produce your sales register upon which I will do a best judgment assessment. No, they should come with their proposition with whatever the basis they have got, and we are supposed to defend that. We are not supposed to give and get the assessment done. We did not produce our entire books of accounts, unlike a restwhile sales tax law and other various laws where we used to go with our books of accounts and produce and show them and say that this is what it is. They are going to give a proposition. We have to defend that proposition or come out of that particular proposition. So this is how the differentiation in the normal assessment vis-a-vis the way the GST. If you see in the GST, there's nothing like a normal assessment where you call for records, assess your tax, reassess your tax per se. Okay, the reassessment, if any, is only through evidence collected by them under section 73-74 is what my understanding. Okay, now here the person who was liable to take registration but not taken registration, or whose registration is cancelled for any of the violations in terms of section 29, they cancel the registration, but there is a tax liability, then the officer, the proper officer, will proceed to assess the tax liability to his based on the best judgment. As I told earlier, the principles to be adopted for doing a best judgment assessment should be followed here also. The time limit is same for section 62, here also same. Here there is a specific mention in the proviso saying that no such assessment order, there's a best judgment assessment order in section 63, can be passed without giving a person an opportunity of being heard. First of all, you have to track that person who is unregistered. Then you have to give him a notice. Since he is not within your clutches, so you may do a probable best judgment and intimate him this is what is a proposal you are making. he should be given an opportunity to explain why it should not be done. And many a times he may feel that the proposition given by the officer is much lesser than the actual figure, so then he may accept and go ahead. No, there will not be an excuse. Later on, if it is found to be underasset, any of section 73 and 74 will automatically be available for the officer to invoke. They cannot escape completely. Here, the notice, 62, there is no specific format because the section does not say a notice or an opportunity should be given, whereas here there is a specific mention. Therefore, the rules say the notice should be in ASMT 14, containing the grounds on which the assessment is proposed to be made on the best judgment basis. And also, they should issue a summary thereof electronically in form DRC GSDRC 01. DRC 01 is nothing but the regular show cause notice. So similarly, here also they will have to give that. After allowing a time of 15 days, here, if you see, again, this rule is coming out and giving a 15 days time. Whereas if you see the act, there is nothing of that particular sort. If you see there, there is no prescription at all, which is there. There's no power of prescription, but still rule is coming out and giving. So it comes out the general power of prescription to, to make the law, implement the law, the rules may be framed. Accordingly, they would have framed it. But putting up the time of 15 days here in the rules, in my view, may not be appropriate for just giving a 15 days time. So even 15 days time is to be given as per the rule to file a reply, and based on that reply, they will pass an order in ASMT 15. Summary will be electronically uploaded in DRC 07. I think this is about best judgment assessment of a unregistered person, where ASMT 14 will be a notice and DRC 01 consequently. Later on, order will pass under ASMT 15. There is no need to go to 73, 74 in this case, but still somebody has been assessed under this section. If they found there's a shortage, they can still go and assess under 73, 74 as I explained. In fact, initially when I prepared, I had missed out this section completely. This is section 64, which is summary assessment. This is a special provision. In fact, though we do not feel that this provision is applicable only in case of goods, but if you read this with a comparison rule and the forms which has been prescribed for it, it gives an impression that it is meant for the purpose of the goods. What it says is, the proper officer may, on any evidence showing a tax liability of a person coming to his notice, with the previous permission of an additional commissioner or joint commissioner, proceed to assess the tax liability of such person. Why he does that? When there's other provisions, why they do this is to protect the interest of the revenue and issue an assessment order. If he has a sufficient ground to believe that delay in doing the assessment may adversely affect the interest of the revenue. So this is again taken from the state provisions, state sales tax provisions, or the VAT provisions for that matter, where when the goods are on the movement and the officer stops and they found that there is no invoice, there is no tax assessed. Now the question would come, how can they collect tax without assessing a first tax on that? So in cases where they have to go through the normal process of issuing a notice to the party, calling him, then evidence, all those things, calling for records. Then the goods itself may be when the fellow may run away, or we may not be able. Then we may not be able to cash. We may not be able to know who the person who is liable to pay tax. So all these issues may come up. So in order to enable the collection of tax in such cases, this provision of section 64, in my view, is added into the statute book, where if they feel that there is a possibility that the revenue may be lost if they don't fasten the assessment proceedings, that too in a summary way. The assessment is not going to be done in a very detailed and with all the principles of assessment. It will be made on a summary basis without getting into too many details. Further, there is a proviso which is there, which says if a person to whom the liability person is not ascertainable, because the goods is intercepted, the driver says, no, sir, I am not the owner, I'm merely a carrier. Then say, who's that belong? Sir, this belongs to this person. That person, when somebody calls, the officer calls in, he says, no, sir, I am not the owner, I don't know what is that, that doesn't belong to me. So in such a case, the statute has come out and said, whoever is a person in charge of such goods at that time shall be deemed to be the person who is liable to assess the tax and liable to pay. And they can levy and collect the tax from that person who is in charge. It may be a person who is storing the goods or a person who may be transporting the goods. So that is how, looking at the section and the provision, the understanding is this provision is applicable in respect of a goods which is available. It cannot, in my view, be made applicable to a past transactions. However, some of the state authorities might been having a practice of invoking the summary assessment to fasten the order without following many of the procedures, and may determine the tax for the past transactions. My reading of this, especially with form attached to this, I think no, this has to be done for a live consignment or a live goods which is available for the officer to determine the tax. It cannot be for a past transaction on a summary basis. What is my reading of this provision? I think the rule, I think I have to put a rule in this regard, because there's something which I wanted to. I think we need to refer to this form ASMT 17. You will get to know this will be talking about the goods which are readily available for the assessment. So therefore, it is clear that this will be in respect of a live goods and not for anything which has happened in the past, as per section 64 is concerned. Now we have covered all the provisions relating to the assessment directly connected. Now 73, 74, as some of the provisions will lead to that. As I was mentioning, 77 has already been dealt with. 73 deals with cases without fraud, 74 with fraud, where taxes short paid or not paid, tax erroneously refunded, excess credit availed or utilized. Hopefully this has been dealt thoroughly, but a couple of questions which was asked to me in one of the seminars when I was handling this. Sir, if you read the provision carefully, it talks about tax erroneously refunded. Can it include the unutilized ITC? my understanding is it only says tax. It need not be output tax. It can be input tax also. So I think going by that, though there is a possibility of argument, if we have to look at from the objective, it should include input tax credit, accumulated input tax credit also. But if somebody wants to take a defense, they can take the defense. There should not be any issue over there. And when we have to interpret section 74, I've invariably seen people referring to an explanation given below section 74, where it talks about, where it gives a meaning of the term suppression, which is what it talks about any information which is required to be furnished, asked to be furnished, not furnished is suppression. But please carefully read section 74. Mere suppression of facts is not sufficient. Suppression of facts to evade tax is what is mentioned. So to evade tax should be there. So evasion or intention to evade tax must be there. Mere suppression is not sufficient to invoke section 74. This is one of my point which I thought I will just mention. Oh, I missed out section 60, provisional assessment. Okay. Though this provisional assessment is there in the statute book, it was also very much available in the service tax law, which was also available in the central excise law. But to my practical experience, hardly few people were availing or would have availed the process of this provisional assessment. The reasons are, firstly, the process and procedure is complicated. Two, they have to execute a bond, then process of furnishing the information, then closing out the assessment, then the cancellation of a bond. The time limit given for the authorities also to pass a final order after having given a provisional assessment. So I think, so generally the departmental officers do not prefer the assessee to go for provisional basis. If somebody goes to the officer and asks, sir, please permit me to go for a provisional assessment, the officer says, no, why you want, we'll come, we'll tell you the way in which it has to be done. So they would discourage this method of provisional assessment. And also, it is procedure-wise also a little bit harassing because you may have to submit all the details for it. Now, coming to what exactly this provisional assessment means, it can be invoked in two scenarios where the taxable person is unable to determine the correct value of the goods, because they say value to be determined mutually decided after 3 months. The contract says you go on supplying, but the value will be determined on a particular later point in time, or depending upon the outcome of something. So your value is not ascertainable, or there is unable to determine the applicable rate of tax. You are not able to identify the correct classification, or the chemical what may be resulting in will be the based on which I'll be paid price, and when my final product itself is not decided, we do not know what's the classification, and therefore I cannot apply the appropriate rate of tax. So, or for any matter, you have you have gone for an advance ruling and you are not able to determine the rate of tax. You may want to go simultaneously for the what I can say, the provisional assessment. So, in such reason, the registered person, the taxable person, has to make a request to the proper officer in specific form. Formats I will tell later, in writing, giving the reasons why he would like to or would opt to go for a provisional assessment basis. Then based on that, the officer will permit the taxable person to go for an assessment on a provisional basis. The time limit given for the officer to decide to give that permission is 90 days. Where in that order for the provisional assessment, he will mention what should be the basis of valuation or what should be the rate to be adopted on a provisional basis. The application to be filed is ASMT 1. Then officer will issue a notice in ASMT 2 to furnish any further documents as may be required in support of the request. The reply to be filed by the applicant is in ASMT 3. Then the officer will issue an order for provisional assessment in ASMT 4, where he will indicate what is the value to be adopted, what is the rate to be adopted, or both. And also that order is going to say what is the amount of a bond which needs to be executed by that person, and correspondingly what should be the quantum of security to be furnished for that bond, but the security to be furnished should not exceed 25% of the bond. And the form in which that security should be given is in the form of bank guarantee. The person who is asking for a provisional assessment should execute a bond in ASMT 5 along with the bank guarantee. Now, that bond would say, I'm assessing blah, 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 and I undertake to pay the differential tax, if any, payable on final assessment, is what would be told by that particular person. Now, here is where it comes. The proper officer, after having communicated that order for a provisional basis, should complete the final assessment for that particular period, not exceeding 6 months. So within 6 months, he has to pass that particular order, final order. However, if sufficient reason exists, that can be extended to a further period of 6 months by the Joint Commissioner. Further, the Commissioner can extend further, but not exceeding 4 years. So this is for completing the assessment. That means every 6 months there should be an application, fresh application for a newer things. Otherwise, of which that 6 months time would have been gone unless that extension is sought. Otherwise, there will be a problem over there. Once the proper officer, when he wants to do a final assessment, proper officer, he will issue a notice in ASMT 6. Then the order, final assessment order, will be passed in ASMT 7, giving the what is the amount of tax payable or a refund, if any, payable. Please note, this section says when any person is liable to pay tax, he is liable to pay interest on such tax which was payable but not paid on the due date. In terms of section 50, obviously that interest rate, whatever is there, that is what from that date till the actual date of payment, whether that is paid either before issuance of final order or not. Sometimes it may show that assessee comes to know there is a differential payable, he may pay before that. Even though final order may be issued later, interest will stop at that point in time. Further, they say if the registered person is entitled for refund, that person would be entitled to the interest on that refund in terms of 56 as well. So I think this is about the provisional assessment. Somebody would have already executed a bond, and so in order to get that release, they have to file an application ASMT 8. for the release of the bond and security. So that release will be given in SMT 09. This is a procedure. And this is what is the tabular form of all the forms which are there for the provisional assessment. I think Chairman sir, shall I stop at this stage and take a questions till now, whatever has happened, or how do we do, Chairman sir?
Oh, sure, sir. Let us take up questions now, sir.
Yeah, because otherwise it's going to be too monotonous, only me speaking. How is there something on a question and tab, sir?
Deepa.
Yes, sir. There's a Q&A tab, which is onto the right of the chat tab.
1 minute, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think I should stop sharing this.
Just near the chat tab.
I'm having a chat, but
yeah. Next to that, there are 3 dots, right?
Yeah. Okay, I clicked there.
Yeah. So there you'll find the Q&A tab.
Madam, I'm not able to clearly see it. Is there
Okay, I
something?
can read it out for you.
Please, ma'am.
Yeah, in reference to section 116, will employee of CA can be considered as authorized representative if the CA has been authorized in power of attorney to appoint subordinates in his place?
Technically speaking, the employee chartered accountant, unless he is having a COP, can be appointed. There is no power of subdelegation unless he is also authorized. See, because I have been given authority, fine, but I cannot subdelegate is what is my reading of it, unless that person also is having a COP. He should also sign that authorization letter, accepting that authorization, and his name also should be reflected in the authorization letter.
So far, I think only with that one question has come. Somebody is asked, wanted to tell you that there are only 2 more hours, so he was asking if you could please discuss the nuances.
Yeah, hopefully I thought that I would have discussed nuances.
Yeah, I think, probably he would have put it before that. There's one more question which has come from Ramaguti sir. He's mentioned that please comment on the recent Supreme Court discussion restoring the 2020 March decision extending the time limit.
Okay.
Please comment on the recent Supreme Court decision restoring the March 2020 decision extending the time limit.
Okay. I'll have to just give you a brief background about it. Initially, when this pandemic and all started, there was an interim order which was issued by Supreme Court in March 2020, saying that till further orders, the time period for any appeal applications shall get extended till further orders. Later on, in between, there was one decision which came in of a Supreme Court itself, which created a bit of a confusion. But however, in 8th March 2021, Supreme Court again came up with a final decision in continuation of the March 2020 the interim order, wherein they clearly said the time starting from 15th of March 2020 till 14th of March 21, the limitation period under any law shall get excluded. Further, it said if any of the limitation is getting expired between this period, they will get additional time of further 3 months, that is 15th of June. This is what was told by that particular decision. Again, unfortunately, what happened, you all know, the pandemic second wave came in. In April, they came out with the order, one more order, similar to what was there in March 2020, saying that intermittent period which they gave, that is 15th April 21, till the present date of that order, latest Supreme Court order. I'm not remembering the date of that order, will be excluded, and that extension of the limitation period under all the laws is continuing. So as on date, my reading of the decisions series from 15th of March 2020 till today and till further orders, any time limit prescribed under the special law or general law, as the case may be, for proceedings before any authority, tribunal or court, or applications before the authority or tribunal court, or for that matter appeals before these forums, would get the benefit of this Supreme Court, is my view. When it talked about proceedings and also application, the question which comes up is, can we take the benefit of that even for a refund applications or any other similar applications? If your order lapsed, you have no other choice. I suggest that you take that plea and take it forward. Obviously, going with the purposive thing, you may take it. Now, many of us ask a question, sir, if that decision was already there, why was there a necessity of a notification number 14 of 2021 under the GST law, extending up to 31st of May? There is a divide on the view. One view is that since there is a specific provision that will prevail over the Supreme Court decision, but I am of the differing view. Since there is a Supreme Court decision coming out, and in the special circumstances I have set out that it should be extended, there cannot be exceptions and trying to leave out some portion, consider some portion. I cannot be available for doing some actions and not available for doing some other actions. So it should be construed liberally with the purpose for which it is Supreme Court has given that. In my view, the Supreme Court decision should prevail over any of these notifications which are issued, is what is my view. Hope that whoever has asked this question, it addresses their concern.
Sir, he's put one more point here. Quasi-judicial authorities were not covered in March 2020 decision, but now it is covered.
No, actually, they did. There was a mention about an authority. Subsequently, it is made clear. So it is implied, which is made clear in 2021 order. That's what we can say.
So Sumitji has asked two questions. Question number one, sir, can you please share the circular of proper officer?
I can share that.
Okay. The second point is, sir, if there is no power to call for the records, then how scrutiny will be done?
Sorry.
If there is no power to call for the records, then
okay,
how scrutiny will be done?
In fact, I explained this. Section 61, the provision is self-contained. It says information available with them. So already what is available with them can be a basis. Otherwise, they should invoke the other provisions like, inspection, search, seizure. They cannot ask for a records. There is no provision directly, giving the powers. In my view, that was intentional because they didn't wanted the interaction by the, like a rest-wide law, officers writing a letter, calling them, asking them, submit this, submit that, I am not happy with this. They wanted to cut the interaction as much as possible between the assessee and the officer, and it should route through a system. What was the mechanism which was designed when they introduced the GST law?
So Rajendra Kumar ji wants to know, section 62 covers only returns under section 39 and 45 and not the annual return under sections 44. Can you please confirm?
Is referring to section 62, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That is only talking about thing. If they're other than, say they're only referring to section 39 and 45.
45.
Correct.
And
44
not
annual return is not
under section 44.
correct. His understanding is correct. The provision is only talking about 39 or 45, not the annual return, because annual return is a summary thing. They're only talking about regular returns being assessed. If the annual thing comes in, they can go directly to 74. There's no necessity, 73 or 74. There's no necessity for them to invoke 62 for annual return. Why the 62 is invoked is where somebody is not at all, though he is registered, is escaping from the clutches of the officer by not furnishing information. That is the case only. It is covered in 62, not a annual return. Annual return is there is already he has filed a monthly return or a quarter return as the case may be. Then they can assess based on that. There is no need of a best judgment assessment.
So same delegate has also asked for one more question. GST has accepted electronic mode of communication. Hence, it may be relevant to take into account section 12 and 13 of the Information Technology Act, which deals with the time and place of electronic records. This may be relevant in the case of electronic mail.
Can you just repeat once again, please? I missed in between.
GST has accepted electronic mode of communication. Hence, it may be relevant to take into account section 12 and 13 of the Information Technology Act,
Correct.
which deals with the time and place of electronic records. This may be relevant in case of electronic mail.
No, I understand. But when I mentioned about the communication. See, the availability, validity may be guided by the Information Technology Act. But the question which I am concerned is when my rights are getting affected, there's a specific provision which is dealing with a deeming service of a notice. We have to go with that in terms of section 169, subsection 2. That is what was my point.
So Vinodji would like to know, the reply was not clear on GST refund application. We have a refund application filed 2 days late after the extended due date, which is before CIT appeals, can be support drawn from the Supreme Court orders. Can support be drawn from the Supreme Court orders?
Yeah, my view is, yes, you can surely take a shelter of Honorable Supreme Court is what my view is.
So Sundar Hegdeji would like to know, since the proceedings are faceless, the chances of officers demanding favors will be zero. Your views, please.
This is not a forum to discuss about that. We will discuss technically anything is there on that. Okay.
So far, these are the only questions which has come up till now. So one more question has come right now. So can you please share the Supreme Court case law related to refund?
Relating to?
Refund.
No, I think this is in the continuation of the case.
Yeah.
No, that see that order I can share it to the member, or they can mail me. I can share that particular decision.
So if you can include it in your presentation and give it to us, we will be uploading the presentation.
It is there. It is there. It is there in my presentation.
So Sumiti, you will be getting it there. There's one more question, sir, which has come up right now. Notice received under section 46. Client willing to file return, but late fine is high as pending from 2018. Any process to get installment or extension, or how to handle reply?
There is no way in which, if you want to file the returns in cases where you do not have money, but you are undergoing this process where you want to quash or crash that particular order. If you don't have money, at least file that particular return in manual form to the officer, at least, so that you can get that defense. The reason is, say, instead of a turnover of 10 lakh, the officer has assessed a 1 crore liability, say, for example. Now, there's a dilemma between non-payment of a late fee vis-a-vis getting a confirmation of a demand on the turnover of 1 crore. So, which one is worst? Obviously, we should try to make good the late fee and file it. But nevertheless, if it is not there, I do not have a means at all, at least file a returns. But don't take a chance, because it is going to lead to unnecessary litigation. Better make good late fee and file the return as early as possible. That is a suggestion.
Thank you, sir. I think so far so many questions are there.
Right.
Before we resume, sir, if we can just address the participants for 1 minute, with your permission. I would like to inform the participants something with your permission.
Yeah, please.
See, like yesterday, it was informed to you, the presentations by each of the speaker as well as the video recordings will be available at kochiicai.org. Only who are members can log in to view the video. For other members of Ernakulam branch. For other participants, this videos will be uploaded in Ernakulam branch YouTube in 1 week's time. So probably next week you can look at our YouTube channel to see these videos. Thank you. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll proceed with the further, because this was the assigned topic. The other things are all additional topics. So I thought I'll break at this stage. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible. It's visible.
Okay. The next topic which I've taken to deal with is departmental audit, section 65. I found there are some anomalies in this section read with the rules. This section says the commissioner himself, it is not that I'm reading that to be like that. The commissioner or any officer authorized by him. Please note this word authorized. Okay. By way of a general or specific order, may undertake an audit of any registered person for such period at such frequency and in such manner as may be prescribed. If you see this section, it is saying the frequency should be prescribed, the period should be prescribed, and the manner in which the audit will be carried out should be prescribed. So 3 things should be prescribed. I'll go to the rules later, then I will explain where there is a gap or a little of a mismatch between this and that. 2 says the officers referred in subsection 1, that means authorized officers, may conduct audit at the place of business of a registered person or in their office. There is 2 things. 1, the officers will come to the assessee's business place, or they may call the records for their office and carry out the audit. The registered person shall be informed by way of a notice not less than 15 working days. Please note, it's not 15 days, 15 working days. So before they start, they should give a clear 15 working days time for any registered person to get himself audited by this provision. Okay. It shall be completed within a period of 3 months from the date of commencement of the audit. There's also an explanation there. 3 months means when they actually visit your premises, or what all the information they ask, when you provide all this information from that day, whichever is later, from there that 3 months will be counted, which can be extended. Yeah, it's here. Provided where the commissioner is satisfied the audit in respect of such person cannot be completed. Please note here, who can extend? Only commissioner. He may reason to be recorded in writing, extend it for a further period, not exceeding 6 months. So he can exceed, but 3 plus 3 is what I read. Some of them read it as 3 plus 6, that is 9 months. So my reading is 3 plus 3, that is 6 maximum. This explanation is very, very important for us to understand. It says the purpose of this subsection, the expression commencement of audit. What is commencement of audit? Shall mean the date on which the records and other documents called for by the tax authorities are made available by the registered person or the actual institution of the audit at the place of the business which was done. See, this can be read in 2 ways. 1, they're sitting in their premises and give you a list of documents. You produce all those list of documents over. From there, 3 months. Now the question will come, what happens if they asked XYZ documents, I produced XYZ documents. Based on that XYZ documents, they're also asking ABC documents, whether that will also be included. My reading of this explanation is one part applies to a situation where they are doing audit in their premises. The other portion is they called information, then they come and start the audit in your place. So whichever is later. So if they're only calling, they're not coming to your place. Once you provide all the information asked for, over, there's no further thing. My reading is if they call further information in the course of the audit, I don't think that is nothing but a process of audit, not a commencement of an audit. So commencement of audit, the first list they ask, once you produce all those documents, that is a commencement of audit. Now, 5. During the course of audit, authorized officer, and reading section here, may require the registered person to afford him a necessary facility to verify the books of accounts. Basically, if they want to give access to books, records, etc., furnish such information as may be required and render assistance for the timely completion. So it's only obligation which has been given. Subsection 6 says, on conclusion of the audit, the proper officer. Why I have highlighted this? Hitherto they were using authorized officer, whereas it comes to here, it is talking about a proper officer. My reading of this section 65 is this. The final report cannot be issued by the audit wing or audit officer. It should be communicated to the jurisdictional proper officer, and he should only issue this particular final audit, because he is a person who is having the jurisdiction and assigned the power for things. Otherwise, they would have used the word everywhere authorized officer. There was proper officer. There was no necessity of using the authorized officer at one place and proper officer another place. It also has a way, as they said, there should be only one authority who should be in charge of the entire adjudication and the regular assessment, etc. That is nothing but a proper officer, and that proper officer will be one person, that to either a state or center. This is what was a mandate and the promise which was given on the introduction of the GST law. I think that is, looking at that, there is a conscious usage of the word authorized officer and proper officer separately in the section, though audit might be commenced and carried out by the authorized officer, but whereas the final audit report should be issued within 30 days from the completion. Okay, on conclusion within 30 days, proper officer. Please see here, commencement to a completion 3 months. Now, having completed, why they have given 30 days? Because that should go to proper officer and he has to issue the final audit report. That is where this 30 days in my understanding. So proper officer, the final audit report should be from the jurisdictional proper officer, not from the audit wing. This point may be taken up later by various, in judicial forum, if as a one technical point, if they don't address that appropriately and they don't design their system appropriately at this time. Again, as I said, this audit is not a full and final. Audit should lead to section 73, 74, if there's any short payment or a non-payment or any excess refund, or there's any excess ITC or excess utilization of ITC. So audit also should necessarily lead to any demand. But the practice might be that, in the audit itself, they recover. That is not a right methodology. But however, even they can do that in terms of, they can ask that to be done under section 73.5 or 74.5. Please note 73.5, 74.5 always is a rescue. And now that has been mandated in the provision by adding rule 142, 1 capital A, 142 within bracket 1A, requires that, DRC 01A to be issued before issue of a notice quantifying the amount of taxes payable upon which if you pay the taxes when there is no intention to evade taxes, then no penalties shall be payable if you pay tax plus interest. Otherwise, the 74 provisions will come up as has been already explained on the day one. Here, when this particular audit and one more practice, what is there of the audit team, whenever any point is noted in the audit, they automatically invoke section 74(5) and collect the penalty of 15%. My suggestion is please do not accept that 15% because it may have other consequences. Say, for example, there was a short payment of tax due to classification error, which was found by the audit. Once you accept and pay the differential amount and pay that 15%, you cannot issue a debit note and pass on the benefit to the customer to avoid ITC. Because under section 17, there's a restriction that if any taxes are paid under 74, the recipient is not eligible to take a credit. So be cautious about it. Not only that, some of the organizations are very particular about no penalty being reflected in their records. If you are accepting this comes as a penalty, and more so, if you are paying that 15%, you're admitting that there was a suppression to evade tax, or therefore there was a willful misstatement to evade tax, or there was a fraud. So you are accepting something which do not exist merely to overcome the litigation. In such a scenario, if you still want to go ahead, clearly write a letter stating this is what is the notice, this is what has been given. We clearly explain that there is none of the elements contained in section 73. However, on being pointed out and being insisted upon, we are agreeing. We are not agreeing, we are paying so that the matter get closed without prejudice to any future rights which we are entitled to defend the same. Something like that can be written and communicated to defend, to use it in a later point in time. I have extracted rule 101 also as a supplemental to section 65, where there the authorized officer is going to issue as per the act, whereas rule is using the word proper officer. So in my understanding, the rule is improper because he will not be a proper officer. Proper officer will be that too they are using the proper officer. The proper officer means a jurisdiction officer. So there is a mistake in the rule. So they have to correct themselves. Otherwise, of which there will be a problem as to the challenging. Otherwise, they should go and do a retrospective amendments at a later point in time. Yeah, I think these are all rules which I already explained. Here, this is a summary of the section 65. There, when we read the rules, I told about three things which there has to be prescribed: the manner and the periodicity and the period and the frequency. It only says period, there's a financial part thereof, but frequency is not set out in the rules. So we have to wait. Maybe still now presently when the first audit is happening, it's okay. But the rule should come out and say what should be the frequency or when they should. If already once the audit has happened, then we say it's already audited. Since there's a frequency not set out, are they free to carry out or they are not entitled to carry out is something which is going to be a matter of debate. This all I have explained already. Section 66 is a special audit where this will be invoked is when there's any scrutiny happening, there's an inquiry happening or an investigation or any other proceedings is being carried out. The assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner, one of the low creditor officer or above, ASDC or above, not below him, in two issues, that is a valuation issue or ITC, where they feel there is a complexity, they can't understand. They are not able to see so clearly, but they feel that there's something which they are not able to get. They may, with the commissioner's approval, ask for invoking section 66. In such a scenario, commissioner will nominate the CA, chartered accountant or a cost accountant, for carrying out the audit. The such CA, the chartered accountant or a cost accountant, has to submit a report within 90 days, which may be further extended by another 90 days. This power is there even if the books are accounted in some other statute, that doesn't debar from invoking this particular provision. When they come out with that particular findings, that particular finding should be shown to the registered person, and he should be given an opportunity of explaining it if the authority wants to use that information against the person. If they are not going to use against that particular registered person, they can just keep quiet. They keep the report in their file and keep quiet. The remuneration for this audit will be determined and paid by the commissioner, not by the registered person. Based on the outcome, the provisions of section 73 or 74 can be invoked. So this is what, as to the statutory provisions, I thought I will cover. I thought I will discuss some of the other aspects relating to the departmental interaction.
So a couple of more questions have come up. Would you want to take it now?
We can cover. Please tell me.
The first question is again from Ramaguti sir. He's asked, in the department audit, they asked for 44 AB audit report, ITR copy, cost audit copy, etc. In case of multi-locational registered taxpayers, taxable turnover of the state cannot be reconciled with the above reports. How to proceed?
No, we have no choice or the option other than explaining that it cannot get reconciled. We can only give what is relevant to the state. Obviously, what is not reconcilable, we cannot reconcile. So we have to just explain and leave it at that. Obviously, there will be so many transactions of a different branches. So I think in the restwhile central excise law and service tax law, in order to address this scenario, there was a concept which was coined out and being implemented, multi-locational audit. I don't know whether how that they're going to implement under the GST law, where if the units are located at different places, I mean different states, and having different registration, as a one common body they may authorize for carrying out the audit of as a combined audit of all this. But presently there is no statutory guidelines for it. Unless they amend the law, they cannot invoke this. Until that is invoked, whatever you say, they have to accept. You have to be adamant as to what you are saying and be firm with supporting documents, whatever you submit. That's all.
So another question which has come up is, please quote some cases or examples under which section 73 or 74 can be initiated.
So can you just repeat again, please? Sorry.
Sure. Please quote some cases or examples under which section 73 or section 74 can be initiated.
No, actually the court, I don't think that there is any case law to say that when you will invoke 73 or when you will invoke 74. Rather, it would be that whenever there's a short payment, non-payment, etc., the section 73 or 74 will be invoked. But what has to be done when you invoke 73, 74, there are a number of case laws saying that what should be the content of a notice, how it should be issued, how it should be proceeded, who is having a burden of proof, all those things. I think hopefully those have been covered on the day one on that aspect of it.
Does every search, that's in continuation to the earlier question, does every search case in which something is unearthed will always be covered under section 74?
need not be, because even in a search, there may be genuine errors as to the understanding or a classification issue. There is a couple of Supreme Court decisions saying that they may know 74, but you can always bring it down to 73 if you are able to establish that there is no intention to evade. Because say there would have been a possibility. I'll take an example to better explain. If an assessee was audited and during the course of audit, all the information was submitted, factory visit was made, the product details were given, all those information details you are aware, and they've carried out an audit and they did not raise any objection. Later on, after 2 years, they come out in a search proceedings. And in the search proceedings, they come out and say the classification of a particular goods is wrongly made. Now you can always say claiming a classification on a particular basis cannot be said to be with intention to evade. My understanding was that, which the department also have disclosed. I've been disclosing that everywhere, but there's no suppression. It's only interpretational difference. So therefore, there cannot be any provisions of section 74 can automatically be invoked. There may be a situation where the information would have been furnished in the return, but there's clearly a short payment. They did not have the funds or whatever it is, or thing. So now there's no provision, because unless you pay, the return itself will not be accepted. But this is actually in contradiction with section 7512. 7512 says where you declare tax but do not assess your tax and declare but don't pay. There is no such mechanism available. That means that you are making section 7512 redundant actually. Okay.
He's also made a comment that the department will always choose section 74.
Yeah, they're free to do it. They're free to do it. In fact, there is a specific provision which you are already aware. In fact, it is very interesting. I want to discuss this very important point under section 74, rather 75. 1 minute, I just open that. Okay. Section 75 subsection 2, I'm just reading. 75 subsection 2, where any appellate authority or appellate tribunal or court concludes that the notice issued under subsection 1 of section 74 is not sustainable for the reason that the charges of fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade tax has not been established against the person to whom the notice was issued. I stop at this. I have a problem in multiple things in this section. Point number 1, this section is addressing appellate authority, appellate tribunal and court. It is not covering the adjudicating authority. What happens if a notice is issued under section 74, but the adjudicating authority concludes that there is none of those allegations exist? What is to be done? There is nothing addressed over there. But I read further, when they conclude that the notice is invalid. So please note, the adjudication proceedings, our job is to say why the notice is not valid. That's all. Now, if the authority, appellate authority, finds that the notice issued is invalid for this reason, then over. That proceedings under that notice ends there. Now, if you see further, the proper officer shall determine as though notice issued 71. So he will go back originally. The proceedings will go back to original authority again, and he has to determine afresh as though notice is issued under section 73(1). Now the question to me is, once the appellate authority passes this, shouldn't he give me one more opportunity under section rule 143 1A for 30 days time to comply with it? Is again, I'm thinking, will I get additional 30 days day from the date of that particular order, which we have to debate over the point. Nevertheless, this particular thing, the proceedings in the original notice will end, the new proceedings will start under section 73 as the fresh notice, and all the things will start from the beginning of fresh. You can, even though you are not taking some grounds, some facts, some evidences, you are free to take that particular evidences at this point in time, and you go back to 73(1). So you are free, even though they issued 74, you can go back to 73. That's your prerogative. They cannot simply, the court here, by reading it, what I feel is, court cannot simply say the notice issued for 5 years, I will reduce the demand to 3 years, so you pay. Court cannot say. Court would say this proceedings is gone, over. That's all, it stop at. Then what should be done? The officer should initiate a fresh proceedings again, saying under 73(1), because it says you shall determine. The court will not determine. The assessing officer will redetermine the entire liability assessment again. It doesn't say determine the tax payable. The entire proceedings will go back. This is one point which I, obviously they will invoke 74. We are having a prerogative to invoke 73.
So since we are on 73 and 74, there's one more related question which has come up. Can we challenge the notice issued under 73 and 74 for transitional credit, alleging credit is not supported by valid documents or invoice? 73 and 74 does not talk anything about transitional credit.
Yeah, already there's a High Court decision. And also, in fact, in one of the case, I got a favorable order from the appellate authority himself, saying that transitional credit is not an input tax credit and it cannot be recovered in terms of section 73 or 74. So
the next question is, does insurance companies do not prepare a GST level trial balance? However, audit officers are insisting on GST registration trial balance. Any way out to satisfy the officer? Any way out to satisfy the officer?
No, the point is this. See, you cannot rewrite your books. You cannot rewrite the books at the registration level for the purpose of audit officer. You may derive something based on some rationale and submit that. If they are not convinced, let them proceed. What they will proceed with, how they will proceed with, the burden of proof is on them, because again, audit will have to lead to 7374. Once they go to 7374, it is essential that they have to establish there is a short payment or non-payment with sufficient documentary evidence, which is very difficult, is what my understanding.
So Sumitji is requesting you to kindly cover something on refunds if time permits.
Okay, I think I will.
Just one last question for the time being, then we'll take it up at the end.
Yeah.
What is the appeal process of audit conducted under section 65 and audit para received but no DRC 07?
No, audit para will not result into DRC 07. Audit para, if you accept and pay, is your choice. If you don't accept, or even if you accept, you don't pay, they should issue DRC 01A first. If you don't comply, then you will go, they will issue DRC 01 as a show cause notice. Then you will go with either a 70 or 74 as the case may be, then it will proceed. So there is automatically from audit note, it will not go directly for a DRC 07. No.
Thank you, sir. Then you can continue with the deliberations. We'll take up further questions at the end.
Yes. Yeah, what I have tried to explain here is, in fact, this one recently I covered in one of the seminar as well, where I was supposed to address the departmental correspondences. Generally, these are the way the communication happens between the departmental authorities and the registered person or any other person. One, email communication. through portal, 3 telephonic call, 4 enquiry letters, then letter informing discrepancy and asking to pay, audit related communication. Communication and inquiry investigation is a very detailed. From a simple to complicated. That is how the flow which I have just tried to put up. When any of these communication comes, please try to check authenticity of the communication. What is authenticity? Whether it is sent by the if it is an email, please see who has sent a mail, from which email address it is being sent, whether it is sent by a personal email ID or a departmental email ID, whether they are sending it on a just as a casual basis or with authority under any provision. So check the authenticity of the communication and also note who is the person who is issuing that mail or a letter. Check what is the authority of the person who is writing. That means whether he is empowered to write to you asking the details. Also under which provision that particular information is being sought. You can always check all these things before you go further. First, please check all these things, because invariably we see if you check this, many of the issues may get closed at that stage itself, because you'll get to know so many reasons why that issues are being cropped up. When you get any communication, please do not assume that, oh, there was a mistake for which they have sent this letter. No, please do not go beyond what is there in the words. You do not create an intention behind the letter of the department. Be conscious about it, but do not preempt. And at the same time, do not be in a hurry to reply to any of those letters. Before starting to reply, please understand what is the origin and the background of that communication. Why did it come? What was the reason? What is the basis? And if you feel that that information is not so easily forthcoming from that communication, nothing stops you. You need not hesitate in writing back to that same person, asking him your doubt as to why is it, what exactly you're looking for, what is the purpose. You can say, we have received this communication, we are not clear with the intention and purpose for which it is being written. Kindly let us know so that we can objectively provide all the required information in this context. So you can make the things very clear when such communication is received, so that don't be in a hurry to reply, but be clear before replying. If required, you seek time from the authority that you asked so much information. Presently, I do not have those information. But doesn't mean that you simply say, give me 5 days, 15 days. Then after 15 days, you say, give me another 15 days, and you give me further 5 days. So don't dodge them. If you're asking, ask with reason and real purpose. Kindly attend it. Don't ignore or don't take it light, any communication, which can lead to very, very serious consequences at a later point in time. Evaluate the possible issues and complexities. Once you get a letter or a communication and you read it, see what is that they are trying to say. Please do not get your mind biased either to the, being a professional, I'm telling, either biased to the assessee or biased to the department. As a third party, independently, you review and evaluate that particular content and see what exactly they are looking for. What is not there with him, you need not give to them unless asked for, or unless you feel that it is going to help you. Check the details thoroughly. Sorry, I was talking about evaluate the possibility of issues and complexities. If you feel that they may asking, please give a details of all the products you are dealing. and the classification you have adopted and the exemptions you have claimed. Then when you are checking, you find that you have availed an exemption, but effectively when you saw the condition, you are not fulfilling one of the conditions. Or you feel that they're asking because already there was a similar type of inquiries and raid happened for which they're asking. So see what is to be done by you. Or there's a latest decision of court or tribunal or advance ruling where similar to your business, there's a contrary decision. So they're asking this information. So you know that surely you will be served with the notice. So you have to see how to handle it, what to be done. You should be cautious about it. If you're giving any details or the data, check it before giving. See the possible other consequences of connected matters which will be affected with that information which you are giving. If you feel that you need a expert, you take a proper consultation of whatever the issue or a complexity which may arise before you submit, and then you handle the scenario. If some officer calls over the phone, then you can always ask first who is speaking. Note down the date, the number from where he is calling, date and time. Ask the reason and source, why and why he is asking this question, from where he got this information. You can always ask. If they say, no, why do you want all those things? Fine. But better you ask. Then do not reply instantly over phone. Say, okay, sir, I don't have that information. I need to check out and get back. So kindly share your number. We'll check out and get back so that you get an opportunity to check the details which you are submitting and also know the authenticity of the person calling and why he is calling. You'll get some time to think and also check the number to whom you are going to call back. As far as possible, you ask them to give a written communication for submitting any information or details. If for any reason, if they are not giving in writing, but you are still providing based on the telephonic call, make sure that you write a letter explaining the facts which has led to you submitting the details and what was asked and what you explain and what you are providing the details so that it is there on record for any future reference. If it's in case of a letter is being received asking to pay taxes, they say there's a difference between 2A, 3B, etc. So you pay. So please do not simply go ahead and pay or act upon it, nor you neglect. If required, take a due consultation, talk to your friends, talk to people who have already handled the similar situation, then whether really liability exists, what is the consequence, what is best for your client, you can think of, or if you are your own company, you think of it, how to handle it, and then go ahead. If it is payable, better pay with interest and explain the reason why that failure happened and clearly explain it was mistake and you seek waiver of penalty. If it is not liable, you say you clearly make that points clear, put across all your points, but at the same time, don't be opening up all your con. If you're clear that the authority is going to proceed against you, irrespective of whatever you explain, then try to play safe. Don't open up all your cards. Don't open up all your defenses. Let them come out with their things. Then you can use your thing in the legal course of action. In case of an investigation, inquiry, check the authority, whether he has an authority. After having given a details, you can't do anything. At the time before giving itself, you should check. Know your rights, know your obligation. Handle with due consultation if required. And if there's any mahazar is drawn when they come for such a seizure, then whatever the content in the mahazar, what is written, please check on that so that there's nothing factually wrong. Then there's an oath statement or a deposition taken. I wanted to just give this very important because people are scared when they are asked and summoned. They call them and they will make them to sit from morning till evening and then they try recording the statement and they leave them after they take the statement up to night, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, scare them and all those things. So you have to be firm first. Don't be scared. You be firm, but that doesn't mean that you need to be arrogant and aggressive. At the same time, you not be submissive. Please carry a notebook or a diary along with you. Make notes of whatever the points, what they ask for your reference. Please note the deposition or a statement is to the facts, not to the law. They cannot ask you, do you agree you are liable to pay tax? No, that is not what is they're entitled for. They can ask, do you agree that you have supplied these services to them under this contract? Yes, but whether it is liable to tax or not liable to tax, it cannot be binding also. It's not a fact. At the same time, do you agree that you are an intermediary as per this section so and so? No, I don't know as per this section, but my activity is this. I do this. So this is what should be our answer. You may ask for a copy of the deposition. Most of the time they don't give it. If they don't give it, please make a request letter. Please give a copy. If they don't give, I understand that you have the time you got your statement first, immediately as far as possible, you can actually revert from that particular statement. Then sometimes in the course of that recording of statement, they may ask some information or details which you may not be available. It is not necessary that you should tell everything. If you feel that some confused, you say, no, sir, I don't know, or somebody else knows this, I'll have to check out and confirm, give me time up to so and so. You can come back, then clearly make a letter and submit those details. It may so happen that in the course of recording a statement, you may tell something and that got recorded, but immediately come back, check back what all you said, think calmly, and if you feel something is factually incorrect, then you can always write back to them. I've told this, actually the fact is not this, the fact is this. In support of this, I'm enclosing this. You can always go back and explain them. I think these are some things which I thought would be important for us to know when we're interacting with the department, so that we don't miss out anything when we are dealing with the department. Now, to briefly summarize, under the GST law, the assessment procedure is not there in a common understanding of assessment. It is only in special cases and special circumstances, invocable based on the conditions set out in the relevant provisions. Always more inclination would be towards section 73, 74, because that is where the level playing field, we can say, because opportunity of being hearing given, the department has to establish their case with evidences. Assessee is given an opportunity to cross-examine that evidences or witnesses, put across his defenses against them, and defend a case. So I think this is how we have to understand this entire process of assessment along with demand and further recovery, if any. I think hopefully I would have covered all the points what was expected to for me to cover. In the process, if I have missed out or jumped up something, please excuse me. Now I once again thank the Ernakulam branch and ITC committee and also all the participants for giving me this opportunity and hearing me throughout this 3 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are a couple of more questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So GST mechanism is technology and data driven, and the forms seem to take a dominant role. I could not find any legal precedents regarding the legal force of forms. Can you elaborate on the legal validity of forms?
Sorry, sir, the last bit I missed because there is some sound here.
Yes.
The portal part, something you're telling? Last bit?
I could not find any legal precedents regarding the legal force of forms. Can you elaborate on the legal validity of the forms?
Okay. No, there is nothing specific in the GST. See, when you are looking for precedences, you can always go back to the precedences under income tax law, or for that matter, central excise law, or for that matter, any other tax law or any other Supreme Court decisions, where the principles are set. The principles is always the law has to be interpreted and law has to be implemented as has been given by the Parliament, supported by the way in order to implement that law, there may be a rules. That rules may be there to enable the effective implementation of the law. At no circumstances, the procedure can overtake the law. We always say, we cannot put cart before the horse, or we will say the tail cannot wag the dog. Similarly, if the forms are not in sync with the provisions of the law, we can always contest, protest. Unfortunately, that has to be done before the courts. All the assessees may not have a energy, time and power and money to do so. In fact, as I mentioned, there's a clear-cut anomaly in section, as far as the return filing is concerned, because section 7512 clearly gives an indication that return filing should not be linked with the payment of tax. But unfortunately, it has been done. In fact, when one of the cases was challenged also, wherein they said they have not permitting us to file return without payment of tax, which is not a requirement. So they asked them to enable that filing. Unfortunately, a representation should go. I've always been, suggesting or at least putting across this viewpoint. Please make a payment of tax a separate step than that of a filing of a returns. On a particular day, on a 20th, just enable me to pay the applicable taxes with the available funds, either credit or cash. Then filing of a return based on the payment, I link it, and if I need additional payment, I will make that payment. So then I need to pay only the interest. Take a situation where I have made a payment of tax into my exchequer, cash ledger and trade ledger both, well within due date, but I delayed payment of filing returns beyond due date for 2 months for unavoidable circumstances. What is the implication? Unless I'm going to pay interest, even with the amended provision, I'm liable to pay interest from the due date of filing a return till the date of filing a return, where there is a separately a late fee being collected. At the same time, I'm also asked to pay interest on the amount which I've deposited in cash to the government exchequer within due date, but still I'm liable to pay. So the government is unjustly enriched with it. So somebody can challenge this and say this is not read with section 7512, and also there is no such mandate in the act for me to make a payment then only file return. So I think that is where nowhere in the return filing provision also it says so. So I think this technology has taken over the law, which is not correct. Wherever such thing is there, it should be protested and brought to the notice of the GST council or a board or authority, whoever it is, very rigorously. Madam, anything else?
You're on mute.
Audible?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Section 19 of the IGST Act, no time limit is my view. Share your view, please. Ramaguti sir has asked this.
Sorry, can I?
Section 19 of the IGST Act. No
Okay.
time limit is my view. Share your views, please.
19 of IGST Act.
Yes.
1 minute. I think so. 1 minute. You can take next question. I'll address that.
Sure. Next question is, sir, if the appellate authority finds that case is not covered under section 74 and the case is remanded back and also 3 years has lapsed, what is the validity of the notice earlier proceedings?
Okay, I'll address first the earlier question, then I'll come to this. Section
Yeah.
19 is nothing but 77 of CGST Act, where the tax is paid with a wrong nature of supply. Yes, there's no time limit, but my reading of 77 and 19 is little different. There is some proceeding already there. Section 77 is not independent. Section 19 of IGS is not independent. It is linked with any other proceedings where in the proceeding it is held that you are paid this tax instead of this tax. Then it is mandated that that shall be refunded and a rightful tax is collected without interest. So there is no mere proceedings only under 77. So therefore, in my view, there is no requirement of time limit.
So, do you want me to repeat the other question?
Yes, please.
Sure. If the appellate authority finds that case is not covered under section 74 and the case is remanded back and also 3 years has been lapsed, what is the validity of the notice bar earlier proceedings?
See, the point is the notice is already deemed to have been issued, but it is issued under 73(1). Proceedings will start, but they will not issue a fresh notice. But the question is, if that notice itself was issued after 3 years originally, then there is no demand which will survive, because as per the 73, there's already time bar. If they have issued within the time limit, that will be sustained.
Ramankutty sir had made a comment in continuation to the earlier question. No
Yes.
time limit under section 77 and section 19 of the IGST refund. Do you agree? So I think you've already given the answer to that.
No, sorry, can you just repeat, madam, once, please?
No time limit under section 77 and section 19 IGST refund. Do you agree? So I think you've already covered that.
Yes. I agree with you, Ramankutty sir. I always, like to debate with you, but in this case, I completely agree with you.
Okay. So Shivram sir has asked, any notification for battery vehicles to include into motor vehicle under the context of section 17(5).
Madam, out of syllabus.
Shivram sir. Yeah, the next question is, nowadays department issuing notice saying that you have availed more than 5 times of the cash paid. Is there any logic behind this notice?
Sorry, more than
5 times of the cash paid.
availed.
5 times of the cash paid. I'll just read out the question once again.
Yeah.
Nowadays, department issuing notice saying that you have availed more than 5 times of the cash paid. Is there any logic behind this notice?
First of all, I'm not understanding the facts correctly. Cash paid, vis-a-vis credit paid. I am not able to. Maybe the general thing to say that your input tax credit is more than 5 times the cash paid. That may be the.
Yeah, that's
They
what I
cannot be any basis. They are merely. These are all the practices which are being followed in the rest by law, which is not valid in the current law. You can simply say that I think. What is the first you ask under which provision you are issuing this notice? Kindly let us know so that we can understand the type of proceedings we are enabled us to give the details, so that can stop the type of inquiries.
So Shivramji would like to know the name of the author of the book that you are using.
Our government of India, our parliament, act and rules.
Okay, the last question is Chandesh sir has asked, under section 73 applicable to evade tax in the context of section 73/74.
Evade tax, yeah. Evade tax is to be read with two evade tax. It is not merely evade tax. Evade means the consciously avoiding. It is not by mistake non-payment. It is you consciously, though it is not telling intention, to evade itself as an intention in it. In fact, in this context, there is a Supreme Court decision in the context of central excise law. Even how to read this, they said fraud in itself as an intention. And when you are reading, it says willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade tax. Now, the first thing is whether this willful is also to be added to suppression. First point. That means to say, is it willful misstatement or a willful suppression? That is a or willful misstatement alone, because there's no comma in between. So it's read as willful misstatement, willful suppression. Again, willful misstatement of what? Fact is sitting at the end. So we have to read this as willful misstatement of fact, willful suppression of fact. As it is, willful itself is something which is rigorous. Further to that, facts is continued. Once we are using a fact, the fact is applicable for both for suppression and for the misstatement. The fact is to evade tax also to be applied even for the term misstatement also. This is how we have to read. Effectively discovering fraud, willful misstatement of facts to evade tax, willful suppression of facts to evade tax. So any of these things exist, then provisions of section 74 applies.
So one last question. So if you don't mind, can we take this also?
Yeah, I have no problem. Until unless participants are okay, I have no problem.
Sundarji wants to know your views on regular taxpayers and regular tax return filers. The chances of getting any notice of scrutiny or the assessment will be very less going forward. He would like to know your views, please.
I think actually initially, if you remember, there was a system of ranking the assessees, giving a credit rating for the assessees. Until that system happens, we can't estimate anything. If everything is getting filed, you are sensible in the way you present your data into the portal, you may be having a lesser chance of getting taken up for scrutiny and all those other things. You would have been already experienced in income tax, all those criteria they put across. Like that, similarly, there is a queries raised in the GSTN portal as to which all the assessees should be taken up for scrutiny. And if you're not falling into the ambit of any of those queries, you're out of the scrutinies.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that's all. Thank you so much for cooperating with us and helping us successfully complete the 4-day refresher course on GST. You just chipped in the last moment when Sai Prasad sir had some emergency in his family. Thank you so much for joining us for that slow-paced, very peaceful explanation and taking all the number of questions that have been thrown to you. So once again, thank you so much. Ernakulam branch is really indebted to you. Thank you, sir.
It's my pleasure to be part of Ernakulam's program. Thank you. Thank you.
And to all the participants, thank you so much for being with us on 4 days and making this very good by talking to us and asking questions, making this a very interesting sessions. We would like to inform you that on Monday, that is 31st of May, we will be having a next seminar on accounting standards for company audit 2021. And the speaker is our past SIRC chairman and member of SIRC, CA Jomo and K. George. We request all participants to kindly join us. The details can be seen on kochi.ica.org. And a very special thank you to our branch staff for their continued support, without which Ernakulam branch will not be able to do so much. So on behalf of the managing committee of Ernakulam branch and my personal behalf, I would like to thank each participant and the speakers. Thank you once again. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, we'll do that, sir. We'll mail the invoice.